On this Wednesday night, new revelations about Israel's deadly attack on a Rafah tent camp. America's unwavering support for Israel, Gaza's deepening humanitarian crisis, and Israel's grim prediction. Canada's budget watchdog admits to bungling his carbon price analysis, the miscalculations and the implications. Summer forecast.
No area of Canada is showing cooler than normal.
What Canadians can expect more of weather-wise. And Major League Baseball steps up to the plate to right a wrong.
We're making strides. We're growing.
How thousands of black players are finally getting the recognition they deserve.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Farah Nasser.
Good evening to you. Thank you for joining us. New revelations are surfacing about Israel's deadly strike this week on a safe zone that killed at least 45 people, many of them women and children. And as the White House steps up public warnings to Israel about civilian casualties, multiple American media outlets are reporting tonight the munition debris found at the site was remnants of bombs made in the U.S. These are before and after images released today of the displacement camp. Israel claims it was targeting Hamas operatives, and the Biden administration says it does not believe the attack crossed a red line. But as Crystal Goomansingh reports, Israel is deepening its incursion into Rafah as officials warn the conflict could stretch through the end of the year.
Israel can kill any Palestinian and call them either terrorists or human shields to justify their murder.
This war can end today without one more shot being fired. All that is required is for Hamas to release the hostages and put down their arms.
Diplomatic discussions around the United Nations Security Council far away from the deadly conflict in Gaza. Scenes out of Rafah Tuesday show rescue workers forced to seek cover, leaving an injured man helpless and exposed. Rachel Cummings is working in Gaza.
And in Deir al-Balah, where people have relocated to, again, the systems are broken, the open sewage in the streets.
Our line is poor, but she tries to paint a picture.
So what we're seeing is extraordinary scenes of chaos, confusion. People are packed into tiny areas where they don't have access to water, to sanitation, to adequate food and hygiene.
A deadly fire at a displacement camp in Rafah Sunday has not shifted American policy.
The continued pattern of significant civilian harm resulting from incidents like Sunday's airstrikes undermines Israel's strategic goals in Gaza.
The Israeli Prime Minister called the incident a terrible mistake. The Israeli military is investigating the deadly fire, but suggests it may have been sparked by a secondary explosion. The IDF was targeting and killed 2 Hamas commanders nearby. American media analysis of the strike suggests they were carried out with U.S. bombs. This former U.S. State Department official says America's reputation, world order, and millions of lives are on the line.
And we return essentially to where we were before World War I, to a might is right universe in which, whoever is with us and, can act with impunity.
Late Wednesday, Israel said it foresees the fighting continuing for at least the rest of the year. Crystal Goomansingh, Global News, London.
Pro-Palestinian demonstrators blocked a main intersection at the University of British Columbia today. Police moved in to clear protesters who are calling for the school to end financial and economic ties with Israeli companies and institutions. UBC is asking for productive dialogue with members of the encampment that's been occupying a sports field since the end of April. Canada's Parliamentary Budget Officer is under fire following an error made in his office's analysis of the Liberal government's carbon rebate program. The report's been at the centre of numerous political debates and is frequently cited by opponents of the program. Mackenzie Gray breaks down the error and has reaction from Parliament Hill.
It dominates the Conservative conversation on Parliament Hill.
Will the Prime Minister axe the taxes so Canadians can have a staycation?
But the report from the Parliamentary Budget Officer that Pierre Poilievre frequently uses to show why he thinks the carbon tax should be scrapped has a major issue. The PBO admits his 2022 analysis of the consumer carbon tax mistakenly also included the impacts of the industrial carbon price big polluters pay.
We will be updating our report. We want to be sure that this time we will not have the same issue in a couple of months.
But Yves Giroux believes his update will give the same conclusions, that despite getting more in rebates than they pay in the carbon tax, the majority of Canadians would see those benefits erased once the economic impact of the tax was factored in.
I find that very difficult to understand.
Something the Environment Minister disagrees with.
That flies in the face of what more than 300 economists have said that show that 8 out of 10 families in Canada where the federal pricing system is applied get more money than what they pay.
But that argument hasn't landed with Canadians, as the Conservatives enjoy a double-digit lead over the Liberals in the polls.
The reality today is that if people have a strong opinion or any opinion about the carbon tax today, they're probably not going to be changing their minds anytime soon.
The PBO update on the carbon tax is actually late. It was supposed to come in the spring, Farah, with Giroux now saying it should be ready by this fall.
Now, Mac, you mentioned polling, and the carbon rebate program has definitely played a factor on the Liberals' unfavorable numbers there, but so has affordability, with the price of a house being a big chunk of that. So the Prime Minister made some headlines on that portfolio today as well. What did he have to say?
Yeah, Farah, Justin Trudeau actually might have said the quiet part out loud when it comes to housing during an interview with the Globe and Mail. Take a listen.
But housing needs to retain its value. It's a huge part of people's potential for retirement and future and nest egg. So, yes, we need to keep housing stable and valuable.
Now, that sounds great. If you own a property, no one wants to lose money. But if you're a potential first-time home buyer, the kind of people the Prime Minister is desperate to win over, that's not what you want to hear, because right now, according to RBC, it's never been more unaffordable to buy a home in Canada, with an average household needing to spend 63% of their income to buy. And in Canada's most expensive market, Vancouver, that number jumps to 106% of a salary. So if prices don't come down, the young people Trudeau is promising generational fairness to likely won't be able to buy a house, an idea backed up today, Farah, by the Prime Minister's own federal housing agency that predicted prices will continue to increase over the coming years.
Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa. Thank you, Mackenzie. The federal government says it's time for renewed leadership at the Parole Board of Canada after a damning sexual harassment investigation. The Public Sector Integrity Commissioner, Harriet Soloway, found irrefutable evidence that Parole Board member Michael Sanford sexually harassed 4 employees over 8 years, and that management put employees in danger by failing to respond. Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc says he is frustrated by the Parole Board's performance.
I've directed the Public Safety Department to work with the Parole Board to tell us exactly what plans they have in place to obviously implement the recommendations, but ensure that this kind of circumstance can never happen again.
Sanford resigned in 2022 when he learned the investigation against him was launched. The chair of the board is retiring at the end of the month. 7 more Ontario schools and boards have joined a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit against social media giants Meta, Snapchat, and TikTok. They allege their products are designed for compulsive use and have disrupted the way children behave, think, and learn. The companies are also accused of creating a student population that suffers from increasing mental health issues. The original lawsuit was filed in March by 4 of Ontario's largest school boards. The provincial government says it's choosing to collaborate with the platforms. The past few summers, Canadians have seen a real shift in weather patterns and extremes thanks to climate change. And this summer will be no different. Neetha Garcha explains what the Weather Network's national summer forecast for the months of June, July, and August could mean for you.
As Canadians prepare for the summer months ahead, the forecast is in. According to the Weather Network, much of the country can expect warmer temperatures, fewer rainy days, and increased sunshine. But with the heat comes a heightened risk of wildfires, drought, and poor air quality.
Even though, for example, the West is predicted to be relatively normal, normal still means fires.
Experts emphasize the need to prepare in advance for all types of changing and extreme weather events driven by climate change.
We don't want to wait until the event and scramble out and not be able to buy an air conditioner or not have a plan.
Kind of a likelihood that we could have a number of very damaging hurricanes, very strong hurricanes, I think it's increased this summer. These long-term weather forecasts have so much uncertainty. We have to be a little careful on putting too much credence in them.
If I look at the seasonal forecast, June, July, August, we're showing no area of Canada is showing cooler than normal.
In Western Canada, including British Columbia and Alberta, a typical summer is expected with occasional hot spells and increased wildfire risks despite some rainfall. Central regions to the Atlantic, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec and the Maritimes face warmer conditions with heightened risks of heat waves and thunderstorms. Northern areas anticipate near normal temperatures but continue to face concerns over wildfires and air quality.
We could have more than 24 or 5 named storms this year, being one of the busiest on record, partly because of the La Nina. The good news is that recent rains in the month of May have reduced the drought.
As Canadians gear up for summer, the national forecast serves as a reminder to stay weather aware and prepared for potential risks. From wildfires to hurricanes, experts say being proactive can make all the difference in staying safe during the warmer months ahead. Neetu Garcha, Global News, Vancouver.
In India, an unprecedented deadly heat wave has set a new temperature record. Delhi soared above 52 degrees Celsius today. That's believed to be the highest temperature ever recorded in India. Temperatures are expected to ease tomorrow. Charges dropped. Coming up, why the world's top golfer is no longer in trouble with the law. Dramatic footage to show you tonight of an explosion in Ohio. A security camera captured the moment the blast destroyed the first floor of a building. A 27-year-old working in a bank on the ground level died. 7 other people were injured. Officials initially blamed the explosion on a gas leak, but the cause is still under investigation. In New York, jury deliberations have begun in Donald Trump's hush money trial. A dozen jurors are weighing a verdict in the first criminal trial of a former U.S. president. Today, Trump struck a pessimistic tone as he left the courtroom, calling it an unfair trial.
Mother Teresa could not beat these charges. These charges are rigged. The whole thing is rigged.
Our Jackson Prosco is following the developments in New York tonight. Jackson.
Well, Farah, the 7 men and 5 women on the jury had a busy first day of deliberations. After about 3.5 hours, they actually returned with a series of questions for the judge. They want to rehear key testimony from National Enquirer publisher David Pecker, as well as Michael Cohen. And then they returned with another question saying that they want to rehear the judge's instructions, which has been handed down only hours earlier. Now, the jury has to consider each of the 34 charges against Mr. Trump individually. Essentially, they're being asked to deliver 34 separate verdicts. Each charge contains within it multiple different criminal crimes that the jurors must try and understand. In the jury instructions that were delivered this morning, the judge made it clear that each verdict must be unanimous. The jurors were told to consider all of the evidence, not just the testimony of Michael Cohen, and they cannot hold it against Trump that he did not testify in his own defense. Speaking with jury consultants today, they're not surprised to see questions coming back so early, given the complexities of this case.
There's so much evidence for them to consider that I wouldn't be surprised if they end up going down some rabbit holes or detours while taking those votes and talking about the evidence, because there's a lot for them to talk about.
And while they're talking, the defendant, Donald Trump, has to stay in the court the entire time. He cannot leave the building. The jurors themselves are not sequestered. They get to go home at the end of the day, but they have had to surrender all of their electronic devices, and they're told that they cannot discuss the case with anyone who is not part of the jury. That being said, they plowed through their lunch break today, and the jurors went until around 4 o'clock this afternoon. Farah, they'll be back here first thing tomorrow to pick up with those questions still needing to be answered.
As I know you will. Jackson Prosco in New York. Thank you, Jackson. Prosecutors in Kentucky have dropped criminal charges against the world's top male golfer, Scottie Scheffler, nearly 2 weeks after he was arrested outside the PGA Championship.
Mr. Scheffler's characterization that this was, quote, a big misunderstanding, close quote, is corroborated by the evidence.
The 27-year-old was arrested in Louisville on May 17th and was charged with allegedly assaulting a police officer with his vehicle, along with 3 misdemeanors. Prosecutors dropped those charges due to a lack of sufficient evidence. The officer who handcuffed Scheffler has been disciplined for not activating his body camera during the arrest. Pivotal vote ahead. Will South Africa's ruling party, once led by Nelson Mandela, lose its grip on power? A volcano in southwestern Iceland has erupted for the 5th time since December. It's spewing lava up to 50 meters high with smoke billowing into the air. The eruption has forced residents from their homes in the nearby town of Grindavik, as well as tourists from the world-famous Blue Lagoon Spa. Scientists say the region could see eruptions from that volcano for decades or even centuries. The polls have now closed in South Africa in an election that could mean a significant shift for that country. For the last 30 years, the African National Congress, the party once led by Nelson Mandela, has controlled politics in South Africa. But as Mike Armstrong explains, support has dropped off in successive votes, and South Africa may now be looking at a politically fragmented future.
As South Africans cast their ballots, there was a number being watched very closely. Polls have put the African National Congress strongly ahead, but far from where it once was. The big question is, does the party dip below 50%? It's an issue the ANC's leader, running for re-election as president, addressed on the hustings.
The people of this country are not going to allow the ANC to go below 50%.
South African voters are choosing representatives for 9 provincial legislatures and the national parliament. The party that controls that body picks the president. For the entire 30 years since the country's white minority rule apartheid system was dismantled, the ANC has held that power. Well, it may now have to look to opposition parties as partners to continue ruling. Now, there is a generational divide in this election. The country has an unemployment rate of about 32%, one of the highest in the world. Younger voters are more likely to be affected and pushing for change.
There's no job for youth.
Older voters are more likely to support the ANC, staying loyal to the party of Nelson Mandela. But that said, South Africa has struggled with an energy crisis and rolling blackouts, political corruption, and growing violent crime rates. This man says he grew up loving the ANC, but he's now, for the first time, switched. The man who took the reins of the ANC when Mandela retired cast his ballot Wednesday. The former president has said his former party has to rid itself of rotten apples.
The ANC has been saying it must renew itself. So the ANC must do that.
The counting has already started, but the Electoral Commission has up to 7 days to finish the job. Partial results will be released, with the final results likely announced by Sunday. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
Haiti has a new prime minister. UN development specialist Gary Conny was unanimously appointed to the position last night by a presidential transition council. Conny previously served as Haiti's prime minister from October of 2011 to May of 2012. Former Prime Minister Ariel Henry was out of the country in February when a coalition of powerful gangs launched coordinated attacks. He resigned a month later. Haiti is still under siege as gangs control at least 80% of the capital. Conny faces a monumental task as he steps in to lead the country until presidential elections can be held. North Korea has launched a bizarre provocation against South Korea, flying hundreds of balloons carrying trash and excrement over its border. South Korea's military has mobilized chemical and explosive response teams to recover the debris. Garbage, manure, and animal feces have been found. Finally, entering the record books next, Major League Baseball recognizes the players historically forgotten. Players and fans are celebrating tonight after more than 2,000 black baseball players are finally being recognized among greats like Babe Ruth, including the new all-time #1 slugger, Josh Gibson. Many say the move was long overdue. Mike Drolet looks at Major League Baseball's new record list and what we can learn from it.
Brooklyn's first baseman, Jackie Robinson, started the fireworks.
The name Jackie Robinson is widely known for breaking down Major League Baseball's color barrier. But Robinson wasn't the first black player. He rose to greatness on the shoulders of others like Cool Papa Bell, Buck Leonard, and George Mule Suttles.
If you didn't have a good nickname when you were playing in the Negro Leagues, probably meant you couldn't play.
But play they could. And while the pictures back then were black and white, the record books only saw white.
Here's the brilliant but erratic Satchel Paige in his 40s and still pitching.
Satchel Paige was a rookie at 42 years old, but his statistics from his time in the Negro Leagues didn't count in baseball's historical records until today, when MLB decided to correct what it called a long-time oversight.
Because you don't recognize them don't mean they weren't great. And that gives us now an opportunity to dive deeper, I hope, beyond the statistics to help people want to learn who in the world was Josh Gibson.
But the best of them all was Babe Ruth.
Statistically, Babe Ruth has long been the gold standard when it comes to power and the ability to get on base. But that stat, OPS, now has Josh Gibson at the top. Another legend, Ty Cobb, is no longer the career leader in batting average. That, too, is now Gibson, who should be mentioned in the same breath as Mickey Mantle and Ted Williams, and who just this year was recognized as such in the video game MLB The Show. Not everyone is happy to see the record book amended, the argument being, how can you compare leagues? What MLB has said is simply, the Negro Leagues should never have been ignored in the first place.
We're making strides. We're growing. And that's the quest. As a society, we want to continue to grow. As a steward of this story, I want to move Negro Leagues history further into the mainstream discussion.
And players like Josh Gibson into the pantheon of all-time greats. Mike Trollet, Global News, Toronto.
And that's Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Farah Nasser. Tonight's Your Canada is the Northern Lights from earlier this month, viewed from Waterton Lakes National Park, Alberta. Thanks for watching. Until tomorrow, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Good night.